Chief Wilson Nemalale heads a troubled village. In February 2000, a 4-year-old girl disappeared from his village in Venda. In August that year, residents found a skeleton they believed to be hers. Police sent the bones away for forensic testing.
When she was alive, her mother tied this string around her neck. It was the string that proved to us it was the child called Sarina Ndo.
After almost 2 years, they now have scientific proof. The bones indeed belong to Sarina Ndo, but the tests can't tell them how she died. Her skeleton was found almost intact, only missing hands and feet.
It's obvious that a jackal or some animal chewed off this part. Here are the tooth marks. It was chewed while the bones were still fresh, before they dried out. If it was dried when chewed, it would have cracked.
The bones were all found together, even the ones chewed by wild animals, but no trace of the many tiny hand and foot bones were ever found.
You can't see if the hand was cut, because if I dislocate a hand, it will simply separate. You won't see if it was cut.
Ancient beliefs hold that hands, feet, or any other human part can be used in the making of powerful medicines, much more powerful than mixtures containing animals or plants. People of Malale village believe that Sarina Ndo was dismembered because someone in their midst needed such strong medicine. Sacred Lake Fundutsi, the site of an important annual ritual in times gone by. Tribal elders would select a virgin who'd sacrifice herself to the ancestors. For her family, her selection would be a great honor. They'd hold her down while the chief and Inyanga cut her in prescribed ways. Her flesh, mixed with medicinal plants, would make a powerful potion. They'd sprinkle it around the village to strengthen the leaders. The virgin's screams would awaken the ancestors, call on their blessing. Her life force, selflessly offered, would protect the village from harm. Ritual sacrifice took place all over what used to be rural Venda. But times have changed. A sacred custom once performed to benefit all has now turned into killing for personal gain. Ritual sacrifice has become the brutal harvesting of body parts for paying clients. No one knows how extensive the trade in human parts is. However, the conversations we record build a picture of a trade that is lucrative and routine for the participants. Our investigation begins in Johannesburg, an Elof Street extension under Faraday Bridge. It's impossible to tell which of the mixtures and bags on offer contain pulverized human specimens. Only forensic testing can distinguish animal from human. Vendors prepare for a long day ahead. Some sprinkle their own medicinal potions around their stalls to ensure good business and guard against theft. We supply one of our team with a concealed camera. He will pose as a traditional healer from Venda. His mission: to stock up on supplies of human ingredients. The man who tells us to call him Mr. Tumba disappears for a few short moments, then brings back 2 bones he claims are human. Mr. Tumba kindly wraps our purchases in a piece of newspaper. To make contact with Mr. Tumba's suppliers, we have to wait a couple of days. We're convinced that if we bide our time, we'll eventually be led straight to the source of the supply chain. Meanwhile, we resume our inquiries in Venda to find out where human parts come from and where the belief in their medicinal power originates. We find that mutilated live victims are often the source of the most sought-after parts. The story of self-appointed healer Ernest Mabutha made headlines in October 1998. It came to light that he'd butchered his own 22-month-old baby because he'd wanted to make money from her body parts. This man secured Mabutha's life sentence. The prosecution team had never seen anything like it.
They found the body of the child with the head having been cut, the hands, the legs, and also the intestines were also removed. Mabutha is a traditional healer, and he believed within two weeks or so, he shall have obtained a muti which will help to cure AIDS.
Like most traditional healers, Mabutha claimed he'd received the recipe for his cure in a vision. In his dream, he saw himself holding two insects. The small one represented his baby, the bigger one her mother, his girlfriend. Whichever one flew away would be the one whose life he'd spare.
He tied her up and said, "Come and hold her." I felt I couldn't do it. I couldn't hold the baby down. Then he stood up and took an axe, knocked me over the head and said, "Hold the baby."
Mabutha had forced Sarah to come with him, hoping she'd be his accomplice. When she didn't play along, he beat her into submission. All day he'd made mother and child walk over mountains and valleys, searching for a place where he intended to enact his vision. Finally, they reached a spot so secluded that no one would have heard their cries for help.
I tried to close my eyes, but he told me to look. I watched as he cut her throat. Blood streamed. He collected it.
Night fell as Mabutha worked on his baby. Sarah was reeling. Blood streamed from the head wound where Mabutha had hit her. Methodically, Mabutha collected blood from both his victims.
He collected the blood, put the calabash aside, held the baby, cut her piece by piece, hands cut off, legs cut off, genitals. I felt bitter. The baby cried until she fell silent as he cut her open. Then it dawned on me that he had really killed her. He wrapped the parts in plastic bags and stuffed them into the bag he'd brought along. Even the calabash with the blood was wrapped in plastic and put in the bag.
Later, Mabutha was to mix the blood with a bottle of cola and drink it with a piece of bread on the side. This concoction, he believed, would fortify him against the police when they came.
I dragged myself along. At that point, I'd already given in. I was sure I would also be killed. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't scared of him. I'd already seen death. The one I was carrying at that moment was already dead.
The day after the murder, Sarah was arrested with Mabutha. The court never doubted her innocence. She became a state witness. Her testimony put Mabutha away for life. To this day, the people of Venda regard Sarah with suspicion and fear. How did she survive? How did she walk away free after being part of such a slaughter? People believe that through the blood of the baby she held down, she now has access to dark powers. Sarah recently moved away from her home to start a new life. It's the only way she can ever hope to recover from the stigma of her baby's death. Not so lucky is 32-year-old Ronnie Maluleke. 2 years ago, he got sick. His family calls it an ancestral illness. Only an Inyanga could help. His father took him to the local healer.
The woman said, I will give him medicine to vomit because the illness seemingly starts here and goes up to his head.
They gave me half a mug of medicine. I started vomiting and it cleansed me internally.
The cleansing carried on for days. At some point, Ronnie felt so ill he went outside to vomit. In those moonlit moments, his life changed forever.
They grabbed me and threw me to the ground. They pinned me down while one of them ripped my trousers off.
While 2 of the men held Ronnie down, the third went to work with a knife at his groin. Ronnie felt them mutilating him. They were still busy when an approaching car scared them off. They left him for dead in the road.
I struggled to pull my trousers up, and I crawled from the spot. I was afraid they might come back.
For 4 days, Ronnie drifted in and out of consciousness in the reeds where he lay hiding.
With every breath, I bled profusely. Flies were crawling all over me. I tied my shoelaces around my trouser legs to try and keep them out. I noticed my wound had maggots. I reached to the stream and washed myself. And then I struggled to the village. I slipped, fell and stumbled. Then I came across a young boy.
The young boy ran for help. Someone came and took Ronnie to hospital. Once his wounds were cleaned and he'd regained some strength, he realized that they'd sliced off a testicle. He spent 21 days in intensive care where his father finally found him.
I was very hurt when I heard the news. Did they take my son's testicle to go and make profit out of it while he's still alive?
They cut you alive. When you scream, it means your body parts will function.
He's suffering while they strengthen their businesses with it. I'd like to ask them, why did they take it? I'd like them to explain it face to face.
Maybe they were sent by witch doctors or business people. Those are the Muti killers.
Queen Mokebe from Mahwelereng in Potgietersrus was buried on a Saturday in January. She'd committed suicide, no one knows why. The fact of her death was hard enough for her family to deal with. Then on Monday they heard that her grave had been disturbed. Her father rushed over to the cemetery to see what was going on.
And then when we buried her, we'd put flowers on the grave. When we went back to see the grave again, it was messy. Whoever had been digging was in a hurry. Clothes that had been on her body were strewn around.
We suspected the body would have been stolen, that there'd be no body inside. It was a surprise when we got to the bottom and we saw what we saw. The lid of the coffin had been disturbed. When we lifted the coffin out of the grave, we found the whole body had been mutilated. The head, the arms and private parts, as well as her breasts, were cut off.
A second autopsy showed that even Queen's intestines had been removed.
It hasn't been easy. When I think of her second funeral, I wonder what kind of person does that to dead bodies.
Queen Mokebe was buried a second time. It's unlikely her family will ever know who did this to her. It was clear during our travels through the Limpopo province that ancient beliefs are as alive today as ever. But these beliefs and the people who hold them are increasingly manipulated for financial gain. The Congress of Traditional Healers is waging war on corrupt Inyangas who exploit people's beliefs.
I don't want to hide the point. They used to tell young healers that if you slaughter a person for fat, for what, you'll get rich.
The only sacrificial slaughter Takalani Matiba will condone these days is that of animals. Different parts are cut out and mixed with medicine. Each part has a unique ritual significance. Human parts supposedly work in a similar way.
People used to believe if you slaughter a person and take his human flesh, meat, put it maybe in your car will never get broken. And your car will never get stolen.
The whole hand is dried and sold to, say, a client, but maybe a businessman who wants success in his business. And that hand would be buried at his door, upside down. The belief is that the hand is calling customers into the shop. Then the knuckles of the finger, of the elbow, are dried and crushed, and the powder is then used in a salve or mixed with other herbs. The skin is sometimes taken from the buttocks because that's a layer of body fat, and the body fat is dried and also used in a salve. The brain is used, and the skull is used as the receptacle for that brain that would be eaten.
Whichever parts are used in medicine will be determined by the client's needs and the ancestor's instructions to the healer. Purists say the parts must be freshly obtained and be imbued with the life force of the victim. Parts should be harvested while the victim is screaming. This awakens the ancestors and ensures their presence at the healing. What we found in Johannesburg is that corrupt Inyangas are taking advantage of people in need. Mr. Tumba is happy to see us, until we tell him that the bones we'd paid 100 Rand for are fake, they're cow bones. This we learned from an anatomy professor. To make up for selling us very expensive soup bones, Mr. Tumba agrees that now is the time to introduce us to his real supplier. Enter Pretty Vukuta, a cigar-puffing middleman. He represents suppliers from a local hospital or mortuary. Despite our many questions, he never specifies. Vukuta signs a receipt for a 400 Rand deposit on a human brain, eye and kneecaps. Vukuta says he's been selling parts for 10 years and used to be supplied by his own mother, who worked at a big local hospital. I've managed to get one eye. No? Right, this is one. That's one eye here. Yeah, Baba. Our undercover journalist goes to draw the rest of the cash. The asking price is 1,800 Rand. Vukuta goes along. The specimens are left with a security guard at Faraday Market.
Mr. Vukuta, can we speak to you for a moment? We're a crew from the SABC television program special.
It's time to get details from Vukuta. If the parts are human, as he claims, and he's been trading for so long, he's routinely breaking the law.
Sell us human body parts. How do you comment on that?
Oh, no comment, ma'am.
We've filmed you yesterday negotiating the deal and today claiming that you've been selling these body parts for 10 years. Can we talk to you about where you get the parts from?
No, I've had no comments. No comments.
Meanwhile, our inquiries have unearthed what may be a direct source, a mortuary at a medical school. Talk to Lefi Masebe, one of our other contacts suggested. So we do. And we spend a whole day negotiating with Masebe at his office and at his home. Again, the proceedings are captured on spy camera. Then, over 2 days in April, we conclude 2 separate deals with Masebe, responsible for maintaining at the university. We pay 4,000 rand in total for 2 human hands.
In future, what I call in future, maybe after 3-4 months. Yeah? Okay.
I can make that go.
Okay, well, that's another phone.
Yeah.
Sure, anytime.
Yeah. Yeah. Just be with you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Buying and possessing a human body part is a contravention of the Human Tissues Act. Up to now, the penalties have been minor, although the offence is seen as serious. Soon, new laws will severely penalise offenders. The law aside, medical schools and mortuaries have strict rules about how bodies should be treated. Even after dissection, they should be handled with dignity and respect. Our next step is to return the specimens and confront the dealer. We plan to give the institution an opportunity to respond. As on almost every Monday morning for more than 15 years, Lefi Masebe is right behind his desk when we arrive. We carry with us the icebox containing our purchases.
We'd like to talk to you about your involvement in this trade and for how long you've been involved in doing this.
Okay.
You don't seem to be worried at all that you have been involved in a criminal offense. Why are you not worried about this?
I didn't sell them, but the fact is that this man, because I know him, you see, and he was telling me the story of his old father or the father, something like that. So I just give him because I know him. It was just a favor.
A favor at 4,000 rand?
Well, he's giving. I didn't charge him. He said he would give me the money. I didn't charge. Because these things, they are supposed to, when we have to bend them. It's because they have been used already, and we don't use them anymore.
Are you saying that you've never been briefed about the laws pertaining to the human body?
No, not. We don't have it in this department.
Masebe's superiors didn't agree. They had him arrested immediately on a charge of theft and corpse violation. He's out on bail of 1,000 rand. In Malale village, the community is called to a meeting. 2 years ago, one of their children went missing. They want justice before they bury the remains of Sarinando. If they can't have her body intact, recover her missing hands and feet, they want somebody to pay. But no suspects have yet been arrested.
The child was my granddaughter, and she was married.
For 2 years, we haven't had peace. We can't even go away to visit, because if we come back, we may find our children missing.
In the body part trade, there are only victims. Clients are led to believe they can buy powerful cures for anything. They're so desperate for help and better luck that in the process, innocent people are killed. Communities are torn apart by suspicion and fear. Children lose their freedom. Even for the dead, there's no peace.
Bodies of people being fed to these dogs and dog eating them and sitting, being frightened, knowing that if they see me, they will, bite me. I think I was so terrified.
So Rwanda was largely made up of two tribes. Can you explain the first moment where you really realized there was a difference between these tribes?
The first time that I really realized was a difference was when it was in 1990. I was in primary school, and our teacher asked us, "Are you a Hutu? Are you a Tutsi?" And you will raise up your hand. And I didn't really know what they were asking, so I didn't raise up my hand. I went back home, and they said, "Tomorrow don't come to school when you don't know your tribe." So that day, that time when I was sent back home, my mom told me, "When they ask you next time, stand up in the Tutsi." So we were only about like 2 students or 3 in the class. And you have that feeling like I am not wanted, I am not accepted. My classmates don't really like me because of how I was born, and I didn't have a choice about it. I didn't understand, why am I being called a cockroach? Why am I being bullied at school? Why do I have to be beaten or see people being beaten for being Tutsi? So those things were happening when I was growing up, and really it's the ideology, propaganda that was leading to genocide in 1994.
What was their goal, the Hutus?
I can answer that question. Their goal was to exterminate every Tutsi. I remember sitting in the lounge with my dad and my 2 brothers, because my mom was away. She went to visit our grandparents, and she was with our last born, who was 2 years old then. And I said, "I'm not sure if your mom is going to get back. They are going to kill us because we are Tutsi." And he just gave us a briefing. He said, put on, we were already in our pajamas, ready to go to bed. And he said, "Put on your clothes, wear layers." So we had 2 layers each. And he said, "If you hide, don't hide together, because if you are together, they will kill you all." The next day, on the 7th in the morning, there were all these people running around the village. I remember hiding under the bed on that day. They came to our house, and my dad was not there because he went to hide. They say, "Where is the cockroach? Where is Inyenzi?" That's the word they used to use in Kinyarwanda. And they are talking about the soldiers that were fighting against them. I'm like, we don't know where they are. So on the same day, in the evening, I went to hide in the bush. And when I was hiding, I went, of course, our dad told us, "Don't hide together." So I went alone, and I was hiding in the bush and wandering around and waiting. I was lucky because I didn't have identity card. We used to have identity card in Rwanda that's written which tribe are you. So and you don't get that ID until you are 18 or 16, I think. So I wasn't being asked the ID, so I will hide in front of people. But there's a lady who was walking, hiding, and she had a baby. And she had her ID, and she was just shown her ID, and they just cut her head off. She had a baby. I can't tell how old she was, but was so young because she was still feeding her. And walking, seeing this woman being killed, and seeing the child sucking from its mother when it's dead, I was devastated. I could not pick her up. I wanted to, but I was so afraid to run around with this baby. And yeah, I just passed her and went and hid in the one of the house. You could hear outside, you know, the noise and people running. Oh, find that. There are Tutsis passing. So people will be shouting because they saw someone. When it became about evening, I walked back to my place, and I went and hid in my, you know, what I call the safe place, because it was a pit latrine, which is a toilet with a hole that was completely full and no one was using, and I went back and sat there. Behind that pit latrine, there used to be a football field, and you will hear these Hutus sitting there. They are drinking. They had alcohol, and they were talking about how many Tutsis they have killed. Oh, we killed so-and-so. Oh, we raped so-and-so. And sitting there, I knew that if they see me, they will come and kill me. I was hiding in the bush, and people, Hutu, the killers, were running around saying, come out with the dogs. I did say they were with the dogs. The bodies of people being fed to these dogs, and dog eating them, and sitting, being frightened, knowing that if they see me, they will, you know, bite me. I think I was so terrified. When I ran from that bush, I just ran, I would say like maybe 100 meters, and then I reached to the road. When I heard they're making noise and the dog running next to me, so I ran away and I fell into the road, and they saw me, said, come. So someone just came and beat me with the big stick they had. Those sticks were kind of big on the top, and they had nails on. I just fell into the hands of those people that waiting to be killing us. And they had, you know, they will say, if you had money and you will give to them, they will kill you by shooting you. If you didn't, they will cut your head off. Some people, they will say, oh, I will give you this, forgive me, but they didn't even have that mercy to forgive. So they chopped people's head off in front of me and throw them in that big hole that was there. I was numb. I saw many people killed. I knew it was me next to be killed. So I wasn't really worried. You know, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be killed. I was just like, yeah, that's what is happening. And it was only when there were two people ahead of me that someone shouted. I don't even remember who. I just heard a voice. They said the bank in Kigali is being broken in. They're robbing the bank. So all the killers around us, the attention was not on the people they are killing. They wanted to go and get money. I survived that day because of greedy of people. So they ran away to get money, and I ran off to the bush again and stayed there.
How long were you in the bush for?
So I was in the bush as much as 3 months. It was either in the church, which we were being killed, and I was hiding among the dead bodies. It was either in the pit latrine, I was by myself, I was in the field by myself, or I was on the queue to be killed. So those 3 months has been the longest horror nightmare that I have. Like, I feel like it lasted for, if I may say, because when we talk about it now, we talk about 3 months, but for me, it lasted forever. I felt like it lasted forever because I was not safe at all.
I mean, you were only 12 years old as all of this was going on. What was going on in your head?
You know, when the death is all around you, there's nothing else you think apart from dying. I was numb. I was ready. I knew I would be killed anytime. And I saw people being killed many times. So I was just waiting to be killed. So I kept going until the last day of when I had, again, where we were hiding. I left where I was and I came to see my brother. He's there, he's hungry, and I just sat with him. And the next thing what I hear from the neighborhoods people, they are talking, Kigali has been liberated. And who liberated the country is the RPF. So that's when all the killers, all the people that they started running away from Rwanda and go to Congo. That was the end. That was the end. When you see RPF in Inkotanyi coming to you and saying you are safe, yeah, I knew that I am in the good hands.
What happened to the rest of your family over those 3 months?
Yeah. So my brother, my youngest brother, was killed with my mom, and he was 2 years old. They dug under the ground, and they built on top of that, so they will hide the children underneath. There was about 50 children there, so like under 2 who could not run, 3. So my youngest brother was among of those children that were hidden there. And the Hutu came, and when they saw one of the parents bringing food, found something and brought for those children. They poured paraffin on that place, and they just lit to fire, and all these children were burnt, including my youngest brother. My third brother, who is Emil, was also killed during the genocide. I once was with him because they shot him the grenade, and he took part of his head, I was with him when he was grasping his last breath. I remember when he is asking me for water. I didn't have anything to give him, so that's my last day that I saw my brother being killed, gone, And my second brother, Antoine, he survived. And my dad didn't die, he also survived. But my 2 brothers and my mom were killed in genocide.
What impact does going through something like that, what sort of toll does that take on you?
It has been a long journey to go through these things, because I think what happened to me, your memory has capacity to kind of keep some information, and you don't think about them because you're not ready. I think that's what happened to me. At that time, we are talking about like 5 years, 6 years after genocide, 3 years, you know, those time of period, 10 years. Sometimes I will not be able to sit with people who are talking about their 3 months experience because it was so painful. And when it comes to April every year, and that's when I start feeling, my body will actually feel it, and I will have these memories. I will think of what I saw, but I just want to rush it off because I was not capable. I was 22 then, finished my high school, and I am out. I'm waiting the high school result to go to university. I don't have anything to do. The job I got was with Aegis Trust, and the job was they had a project 10 years after genocide to build what they call Kigali Genocide Memorial. So did I know what I was signing up for? Probably not. It took me back to those 3 months, because when I was doing my research going into the village was to know how many Tutsi family were living in this village, and you know, how were they killed? And then my job was to feed back to the office, because they are trying to build a data of what happened 10 years later. So that's the time, if I may say, 10 years after genocide, I was just like, I just woken up. These things happened to me. And then I lived that life again. The job gave me responsibility to deal with whatever was happening, and that's how I started the journey of dealing with my trauma, but doing something, contributing to the society as well, giving dignity and respect to people we've lost, including my family.
And how are you today?
I am alive. Yes, how am I today? I am doing great. I am thriving. In 2004, I made a choice. I want to start this journey of forgiving. Is it easy? No, it has never been easy. And even now I speak about it, it's not easy. Sometimes people will marriage into Hutu and Tutsis, which it was, they will. So I know one of my auntie married a Hutu man, and this man killed her. But I am committed to keep trying, to keep forgiving when people wrong me, when people are not making the right choices. And that's what really I want to tell everyone that I get opportunity to share with. And that's what I will say, that's what I said when I met the man who killed my auntie. And I was sitting with him. He looked at me. So remember, this is in 2016. And the last time he knows me, it was before, in 93 or 92, I was a baby. So I know I'm an adult. And he looked at me and I said, "Do you know me?" And he said, yes. He could see me through my grandma, who is his mother-in-law. And so I said, you know, yes, I'm glad you know me. I came here to say I forgive you. The forgiveness is the key to your freedom. That's how I see it. And it's a choice and it's a journey. and it's not easy, but it's the key to your freedom.
There was a witch doctor who had laid this child down, put herbs all around her body, and was about to cut her before the security guard found her and rescued her and brought her to this baby's home where I was working.
Reports have emerged that the majority of organs are not sourced from death row prisoners and donations, as stated by officials, but rather from innocent prisoners of conscience, murdered on demand. Researchers across the globe are uncovering new evidence that shows the true nature and scale of these abuses. In June 2016, 3 independent investigators jointly published a 680-page report of irrefutable evidence.
China, to my knowledge, is the only country in the world where the government-run industrial program kills people and sells their organs.
Endless hospitals in here. We go into them in great detail. We're talking about a very large hospital, endless amounts of transplant surgeons and transplant teams.
I was really surprised how high the number was. I mean, as I say, it's multiple between 6 and 10 of the official figures.
Hearings were held by the U.S. Congress, the British Parliament, the European Parliament, and the Canadian Parliament. The U.S. House of Representatives unanimously passed a resolution condemning the systematic state-sanctioned organ harvesting from non-consenting prisoners of conscience. China's killing for organs is making a major appearance across media outlets all over the world. In 2006, it first came to light that prisoners of conscience were being killed on demand for organ transplants in secret detention facilities throughout China. The first 2 researchers to investigate were David Kilgore, former Canadian Secretary of State for Asia Pacific, and David Matus, an international human rights lawyer.
When we started in 2006, I didn't know where the trials would lead or what the conclusion would be. The initial surprise and disappointment was that this was true, that it was happening throughout China, and it was happening from 2001 to the date of our report.
Kilgore and Matus released their first report in July 2006 and later published the book Bloody Harvest. Around the same time, Ethan Gutman, an independent investigative journalist based in London, he spent 7 years doing his own research before publishing The Slaughter in 2014.
We made the point that it was really prisoners of conscience, we believe, are making up the bulk of these organs that are out there. And we came, as David Kilgore and David Matus and I, came to this from the same conclusion from very different, using very different procedures, but we did come to that conclusion.
The investigators joined forces, researched hundreds of transplant hospitals in China, and released their new report in 2016. The 3 investigators were nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for their work. Discovering exactly how large the transplant industry is in China and how many victims there have been is difficult. The researchers spent a decade piecing together the evidence. For example, in September 2013, Director Zhu Jiye of the Liver Transplant Center at the People's Hospital of Peking University told China Economic Weekly, "Our hospital conducted 4,000 liver and kidney transplants within a particular year."
So we had to cross-check everything. So when we had posted volume numbers, we cross-checked it against staff, against beds, against research publications, against media reports, against the purchase of immunosuppressive drugs. I mean, every which way we could. And what we were able to do by all this cross-checking is develop a consistent picture. And in that particular case, we came to the conclusion that, yes, this claim of 4,000 was real.
Shenzhen Central Hospital They have 500 beds. It's actually over that now. 500 dedicated transplant beds. Now, they were claiming in their internal communications at several points to be doing 131% occupancy. What that means, again, 20 to 30 day stay, or what it suggests is they're doing about 5,000 transplants per year.
These examples show that China's official claim of 10,000 transplants per year is easily surpassed by just a few hospitals. But these two hospitals are just the tip of the iceberg. The investigators found that more than 1,000 transplant hospitals applied for permits from the Ministry of Health in 2007 to continue doing transplants. That suggests these hospitals met the ministry's minimum capacity requirement for transplant centers it certifies.
169 were eventually selected. If you assume hospitals just operating at the minimums, never mind actual, our actual estimate is closer to 100,000 a year.
The researchers found other evidence of a massive transplant system, some of it from Chinese officials themselves. He Xiaoxun, a member of the expert committee of the Human Organ Donation Commission, stated, "The number of transplants increased by 10 times between 1999 and 2000, and further tripled by 2005. That's a 30-fold increase in 6 years." Wu Mengchao, known as the father of liver surgery in China, told the media in 2011, "China now performs the most liver transplants in the world." Since 2000, the entire United States has performed an average of about 6,000 liver transplants a year. This could be matched by just a few hospitals in China.
That they had this endless supply of organs available on demand, and the only limit was capacity. And so what you saw after 2001 was this huge building boom. New beds, new wings, new hospitals focused on transplants. And so that the volume, when the system's operating at capacity, increased year by year.
The report shows that just the 169 hospitals approved by the Ministry of Health could have performed over 1 million transplants since the year 2000. Many more hospitals were also doing transplants despite not having been certified. Organ transplantation has been continuously incorporated into the National 5-Year Plan and has become a high priority in China's national strategy. A large number of organ transplant research and training projects are funded under the major national programs and funds. The investigators found that China International Transplantation Network Assistance Center, CITNAC, listed transplant prices for foreigners on its archived website.
It was bringing in about $9 or $10 billion a year. This industrial transplant operation going on across China now. It's a lot of money. A lot of hospitals are financing a lot of their activities through that.
They're watched very, very closely indeed by the top leadership, so they're fully aware of this, as well as the fact that Wang Lijun, one of the Bo Xilai, who was a contender for the Chinese presidency, this was his right-hand man. He was the most famous policeman in all of China. Here he is directing organ trafficking. I mean, he had a center which did this. He was given an award for doing this, and specifically for coming up with a new lethal injection method. He did thousands of transplants by his own admission in the award ceremony. He talks about that.
CITNAC website stated, "We need to give all of the thanks to the government for the support extended for our completing such a large number of organ transplants every year. This is a one-of-a-kind in the world." Researchers were particularly struck by one aspect of these transplants. Unlike anywhere else in the world, they were being done on demand. In countries with advanced organ donation and allocation systems, patients must usually wait years for a donor to become available. Yet in China, waiting times are commonly in weeks. The 2006 Liver Transplant Registry report showed that 27% of samples were emergency transplants. That means they found a new liver within days or even hours.
It was back in 2005 when a patient of mine, who has been on the top list of patients for human heart transplantation, came to me one day and told me that he was told by his insurance company, his Israeli insurance company, to go to China in 2 weeks' time as he was scheduled to undergo heart transplantation. And when I asked him how come such a surgery can be scheduled ahead of time, you know, somebody has to die on the very day of the operation, he said he didn't know, and he went to China and got his heart transplantation exactly on the date that he was promised.
One hospital in southwest China claimed to have donors seeking matched recipients, and also promised, in case of failure, we will continue to perform transplants until one is successful. In 2006, a chief surgeon of the Organ Transplant Center at a traditional Chinese medicine hospital published a study of 50 patients at his hospital who had each received kidney transplants 2, 3, or 4 times.
Another example that's I can't get out of my head is a man from a country who went twice to China. First time he went, they brought him 4 sets of kidneys, and none of the 4 was compatible with him. 4 months later, he came back, and they brought him 4 more sets of kidneys, until finally the 8th kidney worked. And when we saw him, he was doing fine. But 8 human beings have been killed.
In northeastern China, the International Transplantation Network Assistance Center stated on its website, China carries out kidney transplants from living sources. It's completely different from cadaveric kidney transplants in Japan.
Because they have a bank of live donors waiting to get a match on the computer. Like some horrible restaurant where you go in and see a lobster and say, I want that lobster, and the lobster's killed. It's a crime against humanity.
The Chinese government claimed that the vast majority of organs came from death row prisoners, and later, donations. However, international organizations estimate that the number of death row executions at thousands each year since 2000, and decreasing. Chinese tradition requires that bodies remain whole after death. There was no organ donation system in China before 2010. Even today, there are very few donations. Therefore, these two sources combined account for only a tiny fraction of all transplants performed in China. China started performing transplants with organs harvested from executed prisoners at a small scale in the 70s. In the years that follow, it also started using organs from prisoners of conscience.
In 1999, the crackdown of Falun Gong starts. That is the largest action of scale by the Chinese Communist Party since the Cultural Revolution. And by 2000, 2001, that's when you have this explosion of transplant activity. We see continuity in the numbers over time. Falun Gong is as I call it, it's kind of a Buddhist revival group. It doesn't have churches and so forth, it doesn't have temples. What it has is sort of common beliefs.
These shared beliefs revolve around self-improvement based on the values of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. By the end of the 1990s, the Chinese government estimated that over 70 million of its citizens were practicing Falun Gong. Jiang Zemin, the head of the Communist Party at the time, saw Falun Gong's popularity and revival of traditional values as a threat to his rule, and launched a violent campaign to eradicate it in July 1999. Hundreds of thousands of Falun Gong practitioners from all over China traveled to Beijing to appeal to the central government, only to be arrested and tortured. When many refused to disclose their identities to protect their families and friends, they became part of a large, anonymous population held captive by the state. More practitioners were rounded up all across China. This is when large numbers of them started disappearing without a trace.
The official line in terms of repression of Falun Gong of the party is bankrupt them financially, ruin their reputations, destroy them physically. So that the vilification is destroying their reputations, the organ transplants is destroying them physically. There's the physical examinations, the blood testing, the organ examination, which have no other explanation than suitability for a transplant.
It was like convert or die. Convert or die. Turn in your friends or die. And it's state-sponsored genocide. We did not expect, after the Holocaust, to see this kind of medical corruption come round again.
How can doctors, people trained to heal, harvest organs from living people for transplants? Educated and raised in China, Enver Tohti is an ethnic Uyghur surgeon, currently living in London. He was told to extract the organs from a living prisoner in 1995.
They made you disabled to think yourself. My whole body just became a robot, just performed to do what I have been programmed to do. So anybody, if they label it themselves other than communism, the Communist Party or member, then they will be treated as an enemy of the state. Therefore, they are not even qualified as human beings, and therefore they are subject to whatever punishment is available. They made you genuinely believe what you are doing is for a good cause. It is little later I realized I shortened this man's life. That is equal to a killer. I killed him. This thing is haunting me. I have to tell the world to release the things inside my heart to get a little relief.
In February 2017, Freedom House, an international human rights watchdog, published its own report on religion in China. It noted that a review of available information regarding organ transplants had found credible evidence suggesting that, beginning in the early 2000s, Falun Gong detainees were killed for their organs on a large scale. It added that the large-scale disappearance of young Uyghur men, accounts of routine blood testing of Uyghur political prisoners, and reports of mysterious deaths of Tibetans and Uyghurs in custody should raise alarm that these populations may also be victims of involuntary organ harvesting.
I think, Gina, the first thing before you believe or you decide whether or not you want to believe is you have to learn the facts. The facts are there, the books are there, the research is there. Read it. Once you read it, I'm sure there will be no other way for you but to believe it. And we have to, I'm talking about the physician, have all to be together in order to stop it immediately. Until 2005, we didn't have no law. I found out that Israeli insurance companies and HMOs have been providing reimbursement, full reimbursement for these transplants of Israelis who went to China and got these illegal organs. So together with my friends, we sat down with our parliament, the Knesset, and in 2008, the Israeli parliament has enacted the organ transplant law, which totally bans any reimbursement of illegally obtained organ transplantation anywhere around the world. And since then, not a single Israeli patient went anymore to China.
In addition to Israel, Spain, Italy, and Taiwan have passed laws restricting their citizens from traveling to China to receive an organ transplant from an illicit source.
The systematic, government-sponsored harvesting of organs is a monstrous crime.
I strongly believe that the 17-year campaign to eradicate Falun Gong will be seen as one of the great shames of recent Chinese history.
Since I've been a student of the Holocaust, I feel that to a certain extent, what we're seeing is just a continuation of what we saw there in another form, which is the endless and bottomless depravity of human nature. I mean, there's no limit to the form of evil that people can sink.
When I was writing The Slaughter, I sometimes said, oh, I'm writing history, and then at the end of it I realized I wasn't. It was actually still going on. This is a new form of genocide, and it's using the most respected members of society to implement it. This is one of the central tests of our time. We can't avoid this any longer.
If you need a new kidney in the US, you only have a 1 in 3 chance of acquiring it by legal means. People are prepared to pay a lot of money to save their own or a loved one's life. So an international black market of organ procurement, trafficking and surgery exists. There's a huge demand, a major supply problem, and you're just a wet sack of commodities. It's illegal to sell human organs in most of the world. Nearly every country runs on a donation system. You sign up to become a donor, and in the unlikely event that you die in a healthy, clean, salvageable way, your organs can be transplanted into others. One person could potentially save 8 lives and improve up to 50. But there aren't enough donors to meet demand. Half of all people will die on the waiting list. This desperation drives people to the black market, an international industry that exists to supply wealthy patients with new organs, no questions asked. The black market accounts for 10% of all global transplants. However unsavoury, the sale of human body parts is big business. Lungs and livers are as susceptible to market forces as coffee and cocaine. A new kidney on the black market will cost you $100,000 to $200,000. This is significantly cheaper than a legal operation, but price will still depend on the location of the transplant and nationality of the donor. Well, vendor. The word donor implies consent. A new heart will cost around $120,000, but be prepared to pay 3 times that for the transplant. A new pancreas, $125,000. The liver is special. You only need to transplant part of a liver and it will regrow. So depending on how much you want, it will cost you between $10,000 and $150,000. A lung is between $150,000 to $290,000, but most people will need 2, and they have to be the right size. These are the big 5, the life-threatening organs that are difficult to get hold of legally. There are many other body parts for sale, but either the demand is too low or the supply too high for them to be hugely popular on the black market. They are available though. If you want a small intestine, $2,500. Stomach, $500. Scalp, $600. Eyes, $2,000. Skin, $10 per square inch. No tattoos. Blood, $330 per pint in the US. $20 in India. Bone marrow, $23,000 per gram. Right now, gold is $42 a gram. Most body parts have to come from deceased vendors. On the black market, that can mean corrupt hospitals, funeral directors, executed prisoners, and sometimes grave robbers. A partial liver transplant can be via a living donor, as can a single lung in rare cases. But kidneys are the main event. Everyone has 2 and you can survive with just 1. Their widespread availability and the increase of diabetes in the West means the illegal kidney trade is booming. They are by far the most traded organ on the black market. There's 4 basic models of live organ trafficking. A growing trend and perhaps the least exploitative is the direct model. Recipients will recruit a vendor themselves via the internet, but this requires a lot of organisation to ensure you're a match, and you'll need contacts with a willing surgeon. Another is by force. This tends to overlap with general human and sex trafficking. Vendors may be lured to a foreign country with the promise of work, only for them to be forced to give up a kidney or more. It's rare that people are killed for organs, but it does happen. China used to force organ donation from prisoners. They would be kept alive until parts of them were needed. In some parts of the world, a creditor, often a landlord, will accept a kidney as debt repayment. This will usually have been the plan from the start, a kidney being much more valuable than a few months' rent. But by far the most common method is through a broker. These are people who target areas of extreme poverty, claiming to offer people a way out by selling their kidney. Although technically selling their kidney by choice, they usually have no other option. It may be illegal to buy or sell a kidney, but it's hard to view the recipient or the vendor as criminal. They are usually on opposite sides of the world at the extreme ends of wealth and society, yet united in their desperation. It is the brokers that extort, coerce, and take advantage. As a recipient, you'll pay $200,000, and as a vendor, you'll receive perhaps $4,000. The chain of middlemen and brokers in between will pocket the difference. Like human trafficking or sexual assault, war zones are a major target for organ recruitment. Refugees can have no employment, home or support network, and only one valuable possession. If you need to raise money to flee the country, selling a kidney may seem like the only option. Since the beginning of their civil war, it's estimated over 20,000 Syrians have sold an organ. It was a similar story after Thailand's 2004 tsunami, Haiti's 2010 earthquake, and pretty much every major conflict or natural disaster of the last 30 years. Selling an organ can generate some quick cash, but the medical risk is high. On the black market, qualifications and hygiene aren't priorities. Brokers will tell vendors that the procedure is perfectly safe, and sometimes doctors will even convince uneducated vendors that their kidney will grow back. Infection, chronic pain, and a damaged remaining kidney are all too common. These complications, along with an inability to work afterwards, will often send a vendor further into debt and poverty. So what's the answer? It's a difficult one because organ trafficking is similar but fundamentally different to drugs or human trafficking. It hurts and exploits a lot of vulnerable people, yet the more effective we are at preventing it, the more people die. One option is to legalise organ sales, allow people to sell their organs directly to hospitals and patients. This would remove most of the middlemen and ensure healthy, clean operations. This is what Iran have done since 1988. It effectively eliminated their black market, and the number of people on their waiting list for a kidney today is zero. But the Iranian model is unique to Iran and their laws. They still face issues of corruption and coercion, as well as a problem with kidney tourism. There's no reason it can't work in other countries, but it will depend on the country's healthcare system and the industry's regulation. There's the moral issue to contend with as well. Legalising organs is not like legalising drugs. The public is the product, not the customer. You would be incentivising people to cause bodily harm to themselves. This means the most vulnerable in our society would still be at risk. Someone will always be willing to sell their kidney a little cheaper than the last person. People in desperate need will still sell their organs for less than they're worth. The exploitation is now just state-sponsored. To put it bluntly, the government would be harvesting organs from the poor. Should organ sales be legal? I personally err on the side of no, but there's no reason that under the right legal system, in the right country, with the right healthcare, that it couldn't save a lot of lives. Yet at the end of the day, you're still taking health from somebody and giving it to another in exchange for money. There is no morally convenient solution. And no matter which system, the flow of organs is only ever in one direction, from poor to rich. The only way to truly solve the organ problem is to meet demand. We have to massively increase the legal supply of organs. And in most countries, for now, that means many more people becoming donors. Becoming a living donor to a stranger is an unbelievably kind act, and it will always be rare. But nearly everybody could become a deceased donor. These are the current donor rates for the EU and US. There's a lot of room for improvement. Countries changing to an opt-out donor system will help, but not all that much, because no matter the system, no matter the donor's wishes, the decision, right or wrongly, nearly always comes down to the next of kin. To learn about your country's donation system and how to become a donor, visit humaninterest.co.uk/organs. But most importantly, tell your family and friends that in the event of your death, you want to donate your organs. In a time of immense grief, it could save them having to make a very difficult decision, and the lives of 8 people.